Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Literary Lutheran Reads the Book of Concord. Today we're finishing up what we've been reading, which I have completely forgotten, Human Traditions in the Church. We'll finish that and then we'll start on Article 16, Political Order. This topic about traditions contains many and difficult controversial questions. We have actually experienced that traditions are truly traps of consciences. When traditions are required as necessary, they torture in terrible ways the conscience, leaving out any ceremony. The repeal of ceremonies has its own evils and its own questions. But we have an easy and plain case because the adversaries condemn us for teaching that human traditions do not merit the forgiveness of sins. Likewise, the adversaries require universal traditions, as they call them, as necessary for justification. Here we have Paul as a constant champion, who argues everywhere that these ceremonies neither justify nor are they necessary additions to the righteousness of faith. Still, we teach that freedom should be so controlled that the inexperienced may not be offended, and because of freedom's abuse. Romans chapter 14, verses 13 through 23. Still, we teach that freedom should be so controlled that the inexperienced may not be offended, and because of freedom's abuse may not become more opposed to the true doctrine of the gospel. Nothing in customary rites should be changed without a reasonable cause. So to nurture unity, old customs that can be kept without sin or great inconvenience should be kept. In this very assembly we have shown well enough that for love's sake we do not refuse to keep adiaphora with others, even though they may be burdensome. We have judged that such public unity, which could indeed be produced without offending consciences, should be preferred. We shall speak about this entire subject later when we present on vows and church authority. Article 16, Political Order. Note: to clearly move away from the Anabaptists and other radical reformers, the Augsburg Confession states very plainly that Lutherans support the role of government. Christians have the freedom and the duty to participate in proper political order. The Lutheran understanding of God's work in the church and in the world has come to be known as the doctrine of the two kingdoms. Here Melanchthon articulates the distinction between the kingdom of Christ, which is spiritual and a matter of faith and the righteousness of Christ, and the kingdom of the world. Lutheranism confesses firmly that Christ came to set up no particular external government. God has, can, and will work through a variety of political organizations and forms to enact his will in the world. The church, as church, is not to interfere as Rome clearly and often did with the rule of the state. Today the Roman Catholic Church no longer makes grand claims of possessing all authority in both the realms of the church and secular authority. The adversaries accept Article 16 without exception. In it we have confessed that it is lawful for the Christian to hold public office, sit in judgment, determine matters by the imperial laws and other laws currently in force, set just punishments, engage in just wars, act as a soldier, make legal contracts, hold property, take an oath when public officials require it, and contract marriage. Finally, we have confessed that legitimate public ordinances are good creations of God and divine ordinances which a Christian can safely use. This entire topic about the distinction between the spiritual kingdom of Christ and a political kingdom has been explained in the literature of our writers. Christ's kingdom is spiritual, John chapter 18, verse 36. This means that the knowledge of God, the fear of God and faith, eternal righteousness, and eternal life begin in the heart. Meanwhile, Christ's kingdom allows us outwardly to use legitimate political ordinances of every nation in which we live, just as it allows us to use medicine or the art of building or food, drink, and air. Neither does the gospel offer new laws about the public state, but commands that we obey present laws, whether they have been framed by heathens or by others. It commands that in this obedience we should exercise love. Karlstadt was crazy to impose on us Moses' judicial laws. Our theologians have written more fully about these subjects. They have done so because the monks spread many deadly opinions in the church. They called holding property in common the governance of the gospel. They said that not holding property or not acquitting oneself at law were evangelical counsels. These opinions greatly cloud over the gospel and spiritual kingdom and are dangerous to the commonwealth. For the gospel does not destroy the state or the family, but rather approves them and asks us to obey them as a divine ordinance, not only because of punishment, but also because of conscience. Julian the Apostate, Celsus, and very many others objected to Christians that the gospel would tear states apart because it forbade legal remedy and taught certain other things ill-suited to political association. Origen and others wonderfully worked on these questions. However, they can be easily explained if we keep this in mind. The gospel does not introduce laws about the public state, but is a forgiveness of sins and the beginning of a new life in the hearts of believers. Besides, the gospel not only approves outward governments, but also subjects us to them. Romans chapter 13, verse 1. In a similar way, we have been necessarily placed under the laws of seasons, the changes of winter and summer, as divine ordinances. The gospel forbids private remedy. Christ instills this often so that the apostles do not think that they should seize the governments from those who held otherwise, just as the Jewish people dreamed about the kingdom of the Messiah. Christ did this so that the apostles might know they should teach that the spiritual kingdom does not change the public state. Therefore, private remedy is prohibited not by advice, but by a command, Matthew chapter 5, verse 39, and Romans chapter 12, verse 19. Public remedy made through the office of the public official is not condemned, but is commanded and is God's work, according to Paul in Romans chapter 13. Now, the different kinds of public remedy are legal decisions, capital punishment, wars, and military service. Clearly, many writers have thought wrongly about these matters. They were in the error that the gospel is an outward, new, and monastic form of government. Also, they did not see that the gospel brings eternal righteousness to hearts, while it outwardly approves the public state. This has been the Literary Lutheran Reads the Book of Concord, and I wish you a blessed weekend.